says things like, Jesus, of all people, says, do not worry. It's because he knows we do, right? Jesus knows that our lives are filled with anxiety and worry and hand-wringing that leads to headaches and maybe a little sweating. But today Jesus gives us an answer to worry. This is exciting, and it's quite simple. I think it's the simplest of all could be, would be answers. And it's not a stress ball to squeeze, it's not a comfort food to eat, it's not even a TV show to binge and turn our minds off as we watch it. Although sometimes those things help. It's not even closing our eyes or pretending that the world around us is going to go away. Jesus says, do not worry about your life, what you'll eat or what you'll drink, or about your body, what you'll wear. Instead, Jesus says, consider the lilies. Look at the birds. Picture this. Picture yourself in this. All right, you're hunched over a computer, right? Maybe you're at work or school, and projects are due, papers need to be written, something has to be done, and you don't know what to do or say. The bright screen just flashes back at you, and you think to yourself, I'm worried. I'm worried that this won't get done, that I'm late already. Now I won't have time to go to the store after work, that the dog needs to be walked, that the bills need paid, that sports practice is going to last all night and I still have homework to do. I'm worried that I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow and I don't know what they're going to say. That there isn't enough time for any of this. And there's even more to do tomorrow. And in the face of all this, what does Jesus say to do? Well, get up from your chair, walk down the hallway, open the door, go outside, take a deep breath, and consider the lilies. How they grow. They neither toil nor spin, yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not clothed like one of these. In other words, do not worry. Okay, how does this help? Will going outside really make all of our troubles go away? What is Jesus really telling us? Is it really this simple? Well, it's not actually just in this moment of Jesus' gospel that we get this type of message. Over and over in the Bible, story after story, the message is the same. God's message to us is breathe. Let God, through creation, speak to you. So I went through the Bible and I picked out a bunch of stories where we're going to find this exact same thing. And we could be here all day, truly. We could outlast the rain. But I just picked a few. Take Abraham and Sarah, for instance. Genesis 15. In the way back machine here. The great patriarch and matriarch of the Abrahamic faith, we call it. Judaism, Islam, Christianity. Well, Abraham and Sarah, they were sitting inside wringing their hands. They didn't have an heir. They had no child, no prospect of a child, and they cried out to God. And what was God's response? Well, God said, go outside. They were inside. God said, go outside, and said, look toward the heavens. Count the stars if you're able to count them. God said to them, so shall your descendants be. In other words, Abraham and Sarah were supposed to consider the stars, and God says to them, do not worry. Okay, fast forward a little bit. Down the line of Abraham's descendants, first there's Isaac, and then comes one of Isaac's son, one of his sons, Jacob. Well, Jacob, if you remember the story, he got into some hot water with his older brother Esau, who was the heir to the family birthright, right? And Jacob tricked his brother Esau into giving him the family birthright. How? With a bowl of soup. Well, Jacob is worried. Jacob is worried that Esau is going to seek his vengeance. Jacob is scared, worried for his life, and so he flees. He heads out from his family into the wilderness. And there, away from his family, unsure of what lay ahead, Jacob took a simple stone as a pillow for his head and lay there underneath the night sky. And considering the hard rock that lay beneath his worried brow, Jacob drifted off to sleep. And in his dream, God promised Jacob, "Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go." Jacob considered that rock and the night sky, and God said, "Do not worry." All right, Moses. The story of Moses. We're going to pick this up in the middle of Moses' story when he saw one of his Hebrew brethren brutally treated by an Egyptian guard. And Moses strikes the guard. Kills him. And he's worried. He's worried that Pharaoh is going to find out and seek Moses out. And so Moses flees. Where does he go? Into the wilderness. And while he's there in the wilderness, God says, "Why don't you come a little closer here to this burning bush?" He says, "Consider this burning bush." And from the flames, God says to Moses, "I will be with you, and this shall be a sign for you, that it is I who sent you when you have brought the people out of Egypt." Moses considered the burning bush, and God said, "Do not worry." The prophet Elijah, this is way into the history of Israel, the time of the not-so-great kings of Israel, who had forsaken God's ways of mercy and justice and peace, and Elijah shows up to bring the kings back to God's justice. The kings didn't like it too much, and so Elijah is worried. He's worried for his life. And he hides in a cave somewhere out in the wilderness. Well, God calls out to Elijah and says, "Elijah, come outside. Come outside of that cave and actually go climb a mountain. Go climb a mountain, I will come with you." And there on the top of the mountain was wind and earthquakes and fire. And Elijah considered them all. Until after all those things, there was a great silence, and Elijah knew that God was there in that moment. Elijah considered the silence, and God said, "Do not worry." John the Baptist took the masses, the faithful masses, to the river Jordan and said to them, "Wade in this water, see how it will cleanse your souls. Consider the waters." And God said, "Do not worry." We could keep going. We could be here all morning, but I'll spare you. But, we could say Job, right? Job, consider the whirlwind. Jonah, consider that whale. John of Patmos, the guy who wrote the book of Revelation, he was stuck on this island. I'm pretty sure he considered that island. Jesus himself, consider that fig tree. Stories are the same. God replaces worry with consideration. God takes the worried out of their supposed places of comfort, right? Their homes, their palaces, their caves, their families, their old jobs, their new jobs, these sources of worry, and asks them to consider themselves only as a part of the world, creation that God has made. Jesus tells us in the gospel, "Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your span of life?" But we do, don't we? Worry, that is. So we return to our question at the beginning of all this. Will going outside make all of our troubles go away? Is it really as simple as getting outside and considering the grass we sit on, considering the water that flows in the river? I wrote this as if we were outside by the river bottom. Considering the birds that fly in the air, the wind that blows. Is that what we got to do? I lied. I do want to share one more Bible story with you. This one is about King David. 2 Samuel 7, the Davidic covenant. David has just been anointed king after a long battle with King Saul. And the story goes that he finally settled into his new kingly house. And you know what happened to David? He started to worry. He just became king. And not one day into his job worry took over. Sounds familiar? And David had a unique kind of worry. David was worried that while he was comfortable in his house, his new house, that God was homeless. At that time, there was no temple in Jerusalem. The Israelites, they would just set up a tent wherever they were camped, and they would go gather to worship in God's presence wherever they were. Well, David was going to build God a church. But God tells David through the prophet Nathan, don't worry. God said, consider. Consider all the places and all the lands, over all the wandering, over all the countless years that I have been with you and your people. I'll always be with you. I don't need brick and mortar to be with you. I don't need a big church and fancy gold. Consider this. I'll always be with you for all the days of your life, and all the days of your children's and your children's children and your children's 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 children. When God tells us to consider the world, to consider the stars, the rocks, the plants, the wind, even the silences, God is telling us that there's no place we can go where God is not. There's no place we can go where God hasn't been. We want to protect ourselves, right, in our lives from worry. And so we build houses, even churches, buy insurance, stay connected, work harder, stay up later, do more, try to achieve more. And these are all great attempts, but ironically, these are the things that often cause us worry, too. These are the things that, while they can give life, they can also constrict and confine and box us in our lives. Only by stepping outside of these human-made worlds can we consider the world God has made. And it's in this act that we are reminded that God is there. And if God can be there in the stars and the wind, then you better believe that God's here too. As Pastor David likes to say, closer than your very breath. Believe it or not, God is at your mad dash to sports practice. God is in the bright computer screen. God is with you as you rush through the grocery store aisles. And the amazing thing is that sometimes all it takes for us to remember this truth is a lily or two. So consider it. And don't worry, for tomorrow will bring worries of its own. Haven't we all worried enough for today?